if you remember, starting with March, we have been constantly in contact with the community and within the community, online, because the time is such that online is the only way. And the good thing is that practically in the first 6 months of this year, we had more events, knowledge sharing events, than the whole last year. And I truly believe this is the most valuable contribution to this association, to our community. And we've seen this, like I said, from the moment the pandemic started. And it was really impressive to see how the community came up together and how we all shared our anxieties, our questions, our solutions to the problem we faced, and so on. Let's remember, we are the lucky ones as a business services sector who could move almost entirely home, working from home, having no major disruption, having no impact on productivity or quality, as far as I'm aware. In the second week of March, we've been able, half of our companies, they've been able to move between 90 to 100% of their workforce to work from home. And the week after, probably all of us, we moved working from home. So that's why we are still on the online format, hoping this will be as short as possible in the near future. But the moment is not an optimistic one, looking at how the COVID evolves. That is why we are launching the ABSL Business Mixer online. Even our conference will be online. And this business mixer, like I said, it's not only dedicated to Iași, Sibiu, and Timișoara, as the name says, but to the entire sector, the entire country. So this is a platform for you to get in touch with current topics around how do we do, what do we do during COVID, post-COVID, because it's a crisis. It's a very difficult time. And this business mixer will explore three major themes. One is future, how the future will look like I said, post-COVID, continuously COVID, hopefully not. Leadership, how do the leaders adapt the strategies to this unprecedented times? And the third one is organizational culture and people. Everything, the fact is everything changed since this pandemic started. And it's good to have the opportunity to talk to each other. Therefore, I'm inviting you and the business services community to continue to register for this week's session. As registration remains open, it is not closed anyhow. And I am inviting now our friends and partners, COS and Steelcase, to start their panel discussion about the post-COVID era, the case for place and the need to get it right. Please enjoy the session, please enjoy the whole week, and a big, not lastly, a big thanks to all speakers and to all you, the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Just bear with me for a second as I figure out the right screen sharing. Are you seeing the right screen? Can someone give me a thumbs up or down? Yeah, you're seeing the full screen?
Yeah.
Nodding, I see nodding perfectly. So yeah, welcome everyone. I don't think I've ever had 60 people in my kitchen, so also that's a first. So welcome to today's session. Nice to see so many of you taking the time. Oh, I'm seeing something is not going very well with my screen sharing, so give me one more second to fix that. Sorry for this. Okay, So is everyone again seeing the right screen? Yep. Perfect. Okay. So hi again, and welcome to our 1.5 hour session around competing in the post-COVID era. There's a really long title, right? You don't have to remember all of it. But the subtitle is The Case for Place and the Need to Get It Right. So last time we met through ABSL, I believe it was June 11th, something like that. We were at the height of the pandemic in Europe. And, you know, fingers crossed that we don't get there again, although the signs are really not positive in that sense. So back then, most of the conversations were about the now and the near. So how do we help people get back to the office safely? And that's definitely still on everyone's mind. But a lot of people are starting to look ahead, to think about what work and the workplace is going to look like as we get through the crisis. No one knows when that will be, but leading organizations really want to think about it looking forward. So that's really what we want to do with you today. Our session has 3 parts. So first, I'm Ilinka, by the way. I'm leading Central Europe at Steelcase, together with Andrei Angelescu, who is probably waving in the background, even though I can't see him. The screen sharing. So he's the head of architecture and design at COS. We will talk to you about what we, based on Steelcase research, think work and the workplace are going to be like in the future. Then we have Kinga, who's an organizational effectiveness consultant at Steelcase, and Andrei Drok. We have 2 Andreis. You have to constantly figure out who is who. So Andrei Drok is a workplace consultant at Steelcase. So Kinga and Andrei will walk you through how we applied this research that we will share in our Steelcase Cluj Business Center. So we know the emphasis this week is on Iași, Timișoara, and Sibiu, but we just want to take a tiny little detour to Cluj. And it so happens that most of us on the panel and presenting today are actually from Cluj or have some connection to Cluj. So last but not least, Kinga will then invite Horatiu Cocheci, who is the Director of People Advisory Services at EY, and he's also joined. Alexandru Stoinescu, who is Vice President Operations at Genpact Europe. And last but not least, Adrian Fogaș, who will be joining us a bit later, who is the Director Accounts Receivable at Office Depot. So they will join us in a conversation about the impact of the crisis on the employee work experience. So before I get started, some Zoom etiquette points, if you will. If any questions come up, please use the Q&A function, so not the chat, because it helps us to sort through the questions. And then right before the panel, we will take some questions that pop up during the first 45 minutes in which Andrei and I will be presenting. So it's going to be half presentation and half panel discussion. If you have any comments and additions that you want to make to the content as we're speaking, please use the chat function. And yeah, really thank you in advance for your time, and hope you enjoy the next 90 minutes or let's say 80 minutes right now. Great, so let's get started. I think this is an important question on everyone's mind, right? As we're going through this massive global experiment in working from home, and we're dealing with the crisis, right? Because it wasn't enough. People really want to know how work will change and how the workplace will change as a result. Now, I think it's important to mention that one of the biggest lessons that we've taken from talking to different organizations is that simply going back to the way things were, right, is not what's going to make them competitive. Companies told us that the workplace is where they build their culture, and that's really their competitive advantage. And, you know, let's face it, there were some things in our offices and in offices around the world that we didn't get quite right before the pandemic started. Apologies for some difficulties with my slides here. All right, so now we really find ourselves at what I would call a tipping point, a moment in time in which senior leaders have to make decisions about where and how people will work. And I emphasize have to. And if they make the wrong choices, it could really hurt their people and their ability to compete in this environment. So the pressure to get this right has never been greater. At the same time, while some have found that working from home is really a good fit for them, some recent studies are showing that most people are over it. And I really have to include myself here. It's been almost 7 months of working from my kitchen, to which I again welcome all of you. So it seems that we're seeing stories every day about companies that are positioning extreme working from home. So that means that most people are working from home all the time, that the office goes away or it's significantly reduced. And there's some common misconceptions that we've found through our research that we believe are fueling the conversation and the perceptions that this is a good idea, right? This extreme working from home. So we want you to take a look with us today at 3 big misconceptions around extreme work from home strategies and to really break them down. So I'm not going to focus on, I'm going to focus only on a few aspects, right? There's a Steelcase article by the same name that I highly encourage everyone to Google after this presentation, where you will find out a bit more. So I'm only going to emphasize a few aspects in breaking down these 3 misconceptions. And I will make a very important disclaimer here. So I keep emphasizing the word extreme, right? Like many things in life, extremes are not ideal. We acknowledge that there are companies and teams as part of companies that have always worked from home. And it's great, right? And it's been going great for them. So the research that we are making reference to today is about companies that are predominantly office-based, which I think is the case for the majority of all of you watching today. And about such companies making decisions to go to working from home as only working from home, right? As opposed to having to go to the office. So it's really about these extremes. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Misconception number 1 is that it costs less to have people work from home. So of course, that's true, right? If you reduce your real estate and other related workplace amenities, like closing down your eating area, etc., you can save money. But there are hidden costs that definitely need to be considered before you decide and your companies decide to send everyone home full time. So there's a few topics here, like for example, how the home office experience is completely different depending on how senior you are in your company, how large your home is, if you have a roommate or if you have children. For today, I really want to focus on this, on the hidden cost that is loss of social capital, which our research is telling us that it will slow down work in general, and particularly creativity and innovation. Okay, so let's break down this idea of social capital. So one of the main reasons that people are successful currently in working remotely, which is what I would say a lot of studies on the market now are focusing really on the now, right? Now it makes sense that it's going well because we already had social capital. So social capital is a set of shared values that allows teams to work effectively together and people in general, of course. So we already have it, which means that we already have trust, and trust is the currency of innovation. Right, think about it. In your day-to-day life, you're more likely to make an extra effort to help a colleague that you know and that you trust. And over time, if you are away from one another, this social capital, it erodes, it weakens, and eventually it goes away. And if that happens, then a number of other things happen. Morale decreases, turnover increases, productivity overall falls, and eventually leaders kind of quietly abandon these programs and promote a return to the workplace. And we have experience with that, right? There are previous experiences with large-scale mandatory working from home programs since, the introduction of Wi-Fi. And they show right now that we can take a look back and analyze them. They show that the real problems, they only appear after a year or so, right? It's not immediately. And keep in mind that we're barely 7 months into this. I know that it feels like an eternity, but it's only been 7 months. So working from home might seem fine for now, especially because all of us are doing it. But what it will be like when some of us are back and some aren't. And like I said before, what will be the experience like if it's 6 months from now and a year from now. Next, I want to show you a little quote. Yes, my computer is really picking the greatest moments for some technical difficulties, but I think it's working fine so far. So the Microsoft CEO, Satya Nadella, he recently expressed a very similar concern like the one I described in an interview in the New York Times. So I won't read it, I let you read it in parallel if you want, but it's really about how the impact of this social capital erosion, much like things like losing connection to others and losing a feeling of community, it's really hard to measure and especially short term, but I think we can all agree that it is crucial for the success of any organization. Now, a second misconception, or the second misconception that our research talks about is the one that we hear people say all the time. And I also said that at the beginning of this, let's say the first 3 honeymoon period months, that I'm just as productive at home as I was in the office, maybe even more productive. So that really depends on how you define productivity. Some forms of work you can easily do at home, but things like creativity, innovation, and transformation, first of all, are hard to measure in the short term and incredibly hard to do virtually. Now, the reality is, your boss and your leadership, your executive leadership, the shareholders of all the companies that you work for, they don't need you to empty your inbox, right? They need you to come up with a good idea, solve a complex problem. And that part is really hard to do at home. And I think that's very important for you as part of the ABSL community. Your sector is no longer, and actually our sector, right? Kinga and Andrei, who will present a little bit later, they also work as part of this sector in our Cluj office. It's not just about execution anymore. It's about excellence. It's the problem-solving capabilities of your employees that have led and will lead you to growth. So on this topic, this is the topic that I want to spend, let's say, the most time on. I want to look at 2 different things. And I feel, yes, I've jumped over a slide, right? So I want to look at 2 different things, and this is the first one. The first one is that we really need to differentiate between individual productivity and collective productivity. Because everything that we read in the media now is about self-reported individual productivity. I can do my individual focused tasks. So people are spending more time doing this individual work, and research shows a lot less time collaborating. You could argue, of course, that a lot of our meetings were a complete waste of time. But when we talk about collaboration, we often use it as an umbrella term. Like it's, being with others, working with others, that it's always the same thing, but it's not. In our research, we talk about 3 types of collaborative work. And hopefully it's not on the slide, but hopefully you can either take some notes if you want, or read the article that I was referring to. So the first one is informative collaboration. It's about sharing information, coordinating things, right? It's pretty self-explanatory. The second one is evaluative, right? When you're considering things, when you need to make a choice. And the last one, and definitely not the least, is generative collaboration. It's about creating new ideas, solving complex problems. Informative and evaluative, you can do that on video, right? It works. We know it works. We've also experienced it in the last month. But generative collaboration is the most challenging one in any condition, right? Especially now during a pandemic, but really in any condition. And it's the most difficult to replicate online. If everything is completely virtual, you don't really have a normal flow of conversation, right? You cannot read body language when you're sharing something, and you need those things, right? You need a normal flow of conversation, and you need to be able to read body language to actually innovate, or to innovate in the most effective possible way. So that's number 1, that has to do with productivity. And I'll share with you here a second quote, specifically the question that you see at the end. So it's a nice question from the current Google CEO. How productive will we be when different teams who don't normally work together have to come together for brainstorming and the creative process? Right, so this touches upon this social capital that I mentioned, right? If you have never met, if you've never worked together, and all of a sudden you have to generate something, you have to create something, you have to solve something. How is that going to work on Zoom? It's rhetorical, right? If you have some answers already, some experiences, feel free to use the chat function. Now, the second aspect that has to do with productivity and how an extreme working from home strategy would hurt productivity is the fact that work is super social, right? You can't run into people in the hall or in the cafe and have a casual conversation on Zoom or on Teams, right? You cannot plan the unplanned. It does not work. So when we're working from home, we're spending more time with people that we know very well, right? But our social network overall is shrinking. So for innovation to happen, similar as the previous point, people need to talk to each other in a natural flow, right? Which doesn't work if you're speaking over each other because you can't really see who is leaning in to speak next, or the internet keeps cutting off, which is a great one, or you forget you're on mute. So I think these are all things that have happened to all of us at least once today in the last hours. So last but not least on this point, what I think is very important for the ABSL community is that remote work also decreases networking opportunities and chances for mentorship. And both of these things have a really huge informal, social, unplanned component to them. And networking and mentorship are also key for retaining employees, especially in this sector. All right, so last but not least, the glorious misconception of working from home gives you a better work-life balance. So it's definitely the case for some people, right? Don't get me wrong. Back to my disclaimer at the beginning, some people have always worked from home or the nature of their work enables them to work from home. And there's also definitely a good time when you want to work from home. So whether you need to be there to solve something or something that has to do with your family, or for some people that have a really good home office setup, it's a good place to, hide and do some deep work if you really need to focus. But there are some risks if you go too far, right? If you go into this direction of extreme working from home. And here there's also a few things you see on the screen under reality. There's 3 different things. I will only touch upon one of them, but I encourage you to go to the article and read about the other 2. So the one that I would like to really emphasize is the fact that, and this one really scares me, that we're working even more. So the studies that you see on the screen, they're not for Central Europe or for Eastern Europe, but I let you reflect on your own and maybe share on the chat if you want, if this resonates with you. But overall, globally, we are working even more, like we were not working enough to begin with. And there's a number of things that lead to that. So first of all, during the peak of the crisis, there was this kind of general sense of urgency to keep things going, and that's fine. But if you don't have these place-based rituals, like I'm going into the office, I'm coming home at night, you don't have boundaries, right? You wake up, you start working, and you keep going. And 2 things here I want to mention more on a, let's say, theoretical level, and again, happy to hear if they've actually been happening to you or not. So first of all, there's this concept of a social exchange theory that says that if you give me the trust, and I feel that you as a company give me the trust to work from home, or you as a leader, or you as a team, then I have to repay that trust. And how do I do that? I work longer and I'm available longer, right? So Microsoft is also able to extract metrics from their software platforms that show that everyone's in the weekend now sending notes on Teams, etc., and on Outlook. So you repay it subconsciously by working more and by being more available. And the second one is, this one I can totally relate with. After working at home for such a long period of time, we've lost the sense of what day it is, right? This is called temporal disintegration. So when you don't have the rituals to go to work or go to school or go wherever you were going during the day, each day is pretty much like the previous one. And that's a little bit disorienting. I was recently on vacation, but I was still here, right? And I looked at my phone and I saw that it was September. I couldn't, like, how did we get here? Like, I had completely forgotten what month it was, not even what day it was. Like, I did not know what month it was. Okay, so to sum up, we believe that to be truly competitive in a post-COVID world, we cannot do that by working only on video. Also, we cannot actually go back to the workplaces that we had, right? At the same time, we really cannot go back exactly to what we had. There's some things we need to fix that we didn't really get right before, and then move on to something that will truly support the way people need to work now. And that's not going to happen in super distracting open spaces or in very uncomfortable lounges that look good, but don't actually enable you to work. So we really believe that it's not only time, but it's the right time to rethink the workplace. And to do that, we need to provide workplaces in the future that are compelling for people. So that's maybe a tricky word. Convincing would be a good synonym. So a space that people actually want to go to, that they perceive as a destination with a purpose. So it needs to be compelling, but it also needs to be safe, right? But with making it safe, we cannot lose what made it a great place.
To a regular app store. And
oh, sorry. So in the process of making it safe, we cannot lose what made it a nice place and a great place to work with, to work in to begin with. So I will give Andrei Angelescu now the floor, and he will tell you a bit more about what you need to create a workplace that is both compelling and safe. And I will see all of you and hear you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilinka. Well, I guess now we are all aware of what safety means. I mean, having a safe environment is on everyone's mind. This period also made everything so personal, right? Where we were all isolated, and we went through this period where everything became personal. And this is what we're thinking now, and what we are actually going to show in the couple of next slides, 5 ways to build a compelling and safe workplace. Well, just looking at these 5 ways is not necessarily a recipe, but you will see how these are actually layers that are interlinked, and their purpose is to actually allow for space to be more adaptable and to offer the right support for individuals. So I will go through all of them really quick. And just explaining a bit what expanding an ecosystem of places actually refers to. We are quite aware of the concept of having choice and control. And again, this is very much related to personal interaction with people, and also the activity that people actually do during the day. And having the possibility to choose and control where you work, this is something really that enhances the way employees are actually empowered, and actually helps a lot with making people. And I've seen also a question here, and if I may, I can also kind of try to answer to this on the way, where I see this question regarding on how employees are motivated during this period. Well, of course, this is mostly a leadership question, but I think space can definitely help a lot, and just allowing the people to have this freedom of choice and control over where they work. And we can see here now that working from home has always been an option for employees. It's actually been mostly a benefit for most employees, but going through this period where everyone was supposed to work from home, and we now have all this data collected, where we have this mixed feelings about how much helpful this actually is. We need to understand that, again, talking about extremes like working from home, but now with this sense of getting everyone back, we need to make sure that we're not going to the other extreme. So the idea of having this this possibility to explore the spaces where employees can actually choose and have the possibility to decide where they do their activities is even more important. And the idea of having this shift from fixed to fluid, and it actually relates to the possibility to embrace adaptability in the idea of adopting flexibility. So actually it means that we have to change the way we perceive, let's say, as an example, from architectural point of view, the spaces that we have our offices in. We need to be able to change the setups easier. We need to be prepared for reconfiguring the setups that we need according to our activities, according to teams' preferences and employees' needs. This is something that is indeed changing the way office will look, and of course ensuring the flexibility of the space, strongly related to how space is indeed configured. This is something that definitely takes into account level of privacy, collaborative technology that also can be included in these areas. And as you can see with our next principle, all are interlinked and actually are part of this concept that actually focused on human-centered design, and especially in this period where we are, I think we can go to the next slide, Ilinka, thanks. When we're thinking about personal involvement and personal perception about the space we do our work. Focusing more on ourselves within the idea of a collaborative space is something that we need to be a bit more aware, because we are used to the typical open space environments that are collaborative oriented. But as we now understand and have been through this period of being secluded in our homes, now, of course, we need to make sure that deep focused areas are in quick reach, as well as quick interactions for colleagues. And this, again, with everything that I've mentioned before, also ensuring the flexibility, but also the possibility to choose the areas and control the environment you work in. Then moving ahead, because I mentioned collaboration, and everything was designed before with collaboration in mind. If we think about designs of workplaces, the collaborative areas were the ones in most focus we could see in the nicest design in these areas. And most of these spaces are actually split in two types of areas, in closed meeting rooms and open or informal collaborative setups. But now more than ever, and as Ilinka mentioned as well, space needs to have a purpose. And of course, this needs to be safe, but without a purposeful design and setup, and by this I mean to actually help and offer the right support for the type of collaboration that we're experiencing, it's not going to work. And this value of this space is mostly relevant now also in terms of real estate, but also in terms of the value it offers to the employees and to the users, again, from the personal perspective, and keeping in mind safety and a proper and purposeful employee experience. And of course, the next one is really straightforward, and we've all become so proficient in working with technology now that it's only natural to have it included in the physical workplace. But I think it's actually more relevant to take advantage of this and make technology work better for us. And merging these two and having the possibility to have mixed collaborative setups with, and sessions with people actually in the physical space, also once using telepresence, but also going to the next level and being more able to collect data about how space is used, making it more safe, and actually ensuring this this next level of actual interaction and space usage. So this would be, in a nutshell, the 5 principles that and you will actually see this further on in some of them, how they have been used in Cluj. But the main idea of this is keeping in mind flexibility and focus on the individual by making spaces high performant and safe will definitely ensure compelling workplaces that will become a destination and being enriched with the purpose, so companies can actually take benefit of everything that they've learned during this period of time. So I think I'm almost done with my time. So we will go now to Cluj, to Kinga and Andrei, to actually bring us some insights from the Steelcase Business Center. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrei. Well, let's see how proficient we've gotten to be in terms of technology. So I hope you can all hear me well. Hi, everyone from wherever you're joining. Welcome to our office in Cluj. My name is Kinga. I'm an organizational effectiveness consultant here at Steelcase Cluj. And together with my colleague Drok, I'll just call him Drok for the sake of the 2 Andreis in this conversation. He, as Ilinka said, is a workplace consultant, also working in Cluj. We're actually both in the same office, but we have the luxury of occupying the two mask-free rooms in our office. So we'll try and kind of give you a glimpse of our journey here in Cluj, what we've done so far and what we're planning to do in order to support the employee experience. So you've heard some of the misconceptions from extreme work from home strategies and some of the design principles that can be applied for a safe and compelling office design. So we'd like to kind of ground those experiences into our reality in Cluj. Please keep your questions and comments coming on the Q&A. We'll try and address as many as we can during our time. Andrei has already addressed, I think it's Mihaela's question. We have another one from Florin, so we'll try and integrate that in our conversation. And last but not least, before I give the mic to my colleague Drok, we'd love to show you the changes that we've done like live, but we're just in the middle of them and the space is not quite ready yet. But we'd really like to take this occasion to invite all of you back in our Cluj office in the next ABSL conference in November, where we'd like to give you a virtual live tour of the space. But for now, Drok and me will walk you through using some pictures and our words. So Drok, over to you.
Great, Kinga, thank you. So my first question would be to ask you if you see this picture of us on the screen.
Yeah, we can see
that I take this morning.
So yeah, exactly. So the first step into showcasing our offices in Cluj is this photo of Kinga and myself, made this morning specifically for this event. And in the background, you can actually see the building where we have our offices. And just to go a bit through some basic infos about our building. So we occupy 5 of the total 9 floors with around 300 employees. And as you know, according to the type of companies that you have and how large they are, how many departments they have, you have different work styles for each of them. And of course, they have to be adapted to the architecture of a building or to the norms of a different country. So what we're going to do is look a bit on the, let's say, 2 most major work styles that we encompass in our office here. One which is a bit more static, and then the other one which is a bit more flexible or adaptive. So this was working out all nice and fine before the COVID struck. But afterwards, our first priorities was to ensure safety once we would open our offices. And by doing this, we focused, and here you can see it on the light blue area, we focused on creating this spatial distance, also having masks and these kind of elements that you're all comfortable with. Moving on, and the phase that we're working on now, as Kinga was mentioning, is the idea to modify the space and recreate it in such a sense that we still have this factor of safety, but we also think about the employee experience, what makes people want to come to the office, feel good, and innovate together. And further on, we will also be thinking about the idea of, after we've passed the COVID phase, what can we do with our work areas and workspaces so that they're so much more adaptable and not so hard to modify in case of disruptions such as this. And to go further, we're just going to take the 2 work styles and show them a bit in examples on our floor plans. And we will choose the 7th floor plan to showcase our static work style and focus on the dotted area that you can see on the screen. So the above floor plan is the floor plan that we used to have before COVID, and the below one is how we plan on showcasing it to you guys in November once we show it. But let's focus a bit on that area marked so we can see the changes and design considerations that we were thinking about and actually are implementing all over the office. So left, you can see the actual a standard resident worker zone, which has 3 benches of each 6 workers, so it's pretty standard. And to the right, you can see our first response to the COVID situation. So once we could return to the office, we had to make sure that people were in a safe environment, and the ones that were seated at the desk, they would feel safe as well. So what we did was simply use the 2 types of stickers that you can see on the screen. One of them would encourage people to take a seat and enjoy their tools there, while the other one would welcome them to find a different place so that they can have a better work life. Now, you can also see that our numbers of workstations decreased from a total of 18 to 6 workplaces. And this is basically how a workbench looks currently. So we still have the same tools that we used to have before the COVID, including just a small screen in front, which only accounts for visual and acoustic privacy for colleagues facing each other. Now, as a next step on what we're working now, you can see transitioning from the right floor plan to the left one. We were taking into consideration taking out one of the workbenches completely, but all the workbenches that we will still be having in the space would be usable. So we would be going from 6 realistically usable workplaces to a total of 12, increasing. And here you can see an example of how the workstation would be looking now after it's being implemented. So we would be adding space divisions, like the large storage unit towards the corridor to offer more distancing for the people at the desks. But we will also be adding extensions of screens for the frontal screens and adding totally new lateral screens so that people are comfortable to sit both in front of each other as well as next to each other. Besides this, the fact that we took out one of the workbenches offers us the opportunity to offer this 2-meter minimum distance. So people can walk behind the workbenches, get to their workplace without the other people that they pass next to feel unsafe. And here you can also see we've added a kind of in-between area, which we're gonna go into now. So we've been talking a lot about workbenches, desks, and so on, so individual work. But what about those quick informal chats that you usually have? Let's say you have 2 meetings and one of the meetings is finished 10 minutes earlier. Maybe you come into your area, you want to talk with some of your colleagues, but you don't actually have time to take that colleague and go maybe in a meeting room and simply discuss. Up until now, I guess most of us simply just took a chair, dragged it next to the other person's desk, and they just sat down, discussed a bit, and then went on with their workday. However, currently that's not really acceptable considering the minimum distance requirements. So in order to focus on this, because this is how people make connections, this is how people get to know each other and like the place and the teams where they're working, we took into consideration that we will be adding in each of our resident work areas, small areas like this, as you can see, for impromptu small discussions. Besides actually offering a place where people can discuss, have fun, talk a bit and catch up in a kind of safe way with the minimum distance requirements fulfilled, this also offers us the opportunity to create this separation in between the 2 workbenches, which is a bit more elegant and is not only about screens and large storage.
Thanks, Drog. So just to kind of recap and ground you again while Drog moves mentally to the 9th floor. So we've seen now how this resident worker area, which is a more static space in nature, we had to quickly adapt it to react to COVID. Okay, it needs to be safe. Let's put stickers in, let's put distancing in. But then we thought, how could we take this space a little bit further? So remember, Andre was telling you about giving people more choice and control. So this is one way in which we allow our colleagues to switch from deep focused work to quick collaboration. So how we allow for those impromptu collaborations or for those quick problem-solving situations when all you want to do is just ask a question to your team member and you can just quickly move to that space while maintaining physical distancing and safety at all times. So you can lose focus easily, right? You can just move in too close and not even realize it. But with the right geometry in space and thinking about it for a safe experience, you can actually guide our colleagues to have these conversations in a safe manner. So now we'll look at a different space at the other extreme of our office. Drog will show you a bit glimpse of the 9th floor.
Great, thank you, Kingo. So I just got to the 9th floor over the steps. It was a bit of a dynamic upheaval, but now we're here at the 9th floor, and what we would like to showcase here is the more flexible work style that we were talking beforehand. So how this space was designed pre-COVID, the idea was that this space can host a medium-sized team with all of its worker needs and this large spectrum of collaboration, socializing, rejuvenation, but also task works that people need to do. This space was kind of meant to be a high-performing space, to offer this kind of flexibility, to be able to, for people to easily rearrange it, to be able to host brainstormings or any kind of agile-inspired activities and team works. So this offered us the opportunity that once the COVID restrictions were implemented, so the minimal distancing and so on, it was very easy for us to adapt the place due to this high flexibility. And actually, we didn't even need to take out one of the desks that were originally planned for this space. So this was a very, very nice transition to it. But what we actually noticed after we started getting people back into the office after COVID was that on other floors in our large meeting rooms or training and workshop rooms, capacity had gone down. And this was quite problematic for us because here at Steelcase, we have a culture of learning systematically. So employees, it was harder to create these workshops and to offer these opportunities. And this is where the flexibility came in. So here at the 9th floor, with the help of 2 of our colleagues from facilities and about 30 minutes, they can change the space, adapt it on a daily basis in case we have larger workshops. And here you can see by repositioning some desks, which are on wheels, and bringing up some chairs and some small laptop tables, you can create a space that has a lot of digital display, analog displays for people to be able to present and collaborate together, while also being able to tune in people through our technology from other locations or other time zones. And lastly, because this type of large workshops usually tend to take a few hours or maybe a full day, the coffee point that's on our last floor and the nice terrace around the 9th floors offers this opportunity to people once in a break every 1 or 2 hours to just go out, take a coffee, and also take off their masks so they feel comfortable as well as safe during these workshops.
Yeah, so thanks, Drok. This is a completely different space than what we've seen before, and we're kind of showing you 2 extremes that we have in our office so that you can kind of have a wider spectrum to relate. But this is essentially a space designed to foster creativity, which is a fancy word for the ability to think differently or like generate new ideas. Of course, we use it a lot for workshops and for trainings, and you can argue that, yes, I can think at home, I can learn at home, but I'd like to just remind you about that concept of generative collaboration that Ilinka was telling you about. So it's about this capacity and this flow to kind of build on the other's ideas and to have the right tools, both analog and digital, so that you don't have to worry about the experience. You just need to think about the process you're designing or the brainstorming that you're doing. And we really try to, so this is a space that can be transformed, as Drok said, in half an hour. It can allow a team to do focused work, but it can also be quickly transformed into a more creative setting to encourage workshops or learning experiences. And last but not least, Drok was mentioning the coffee corner and kind of the nice view. Those are really intentional in our design. And, you know, people, I don't think this is surprising to anybody, people miss each other. Like at a times when people miss the human connection most, we are having to implement like physical distancing from one another. So with these kind of little spaces that can foster that informal collaboration, we really try to recreate that trust. And it's actually what we're doing throughout our office to maintain that social capital that Ilinka was talking about, to maintain our collective way of doing things, to maintain our shared norms. And of course, like a coffee with a colleague, a spontaneous meeting, or a story you share face to face. I mean, it's just things that you can't really replicate on screen, or at least that's our experience. So thanks, Drok, for this quick walkthrough. Again, we'd really like to have you back in November, where we aim to kind of virtually take you through our space, but this is all the time we had to show you. And before we move on to the panel discussion, we have a few questions on the Q&A section. I think on both of them we touched at least a little. Maybe I'd like to just contribute to Andrei's answer to Mihaila's question, like how do you motivate your employees in this period? I can talk from my personal experience in here in Cluj. I'm not an HR professional, and I don't think there's one right answer to it, but I think it's by prioritizing people. So it's how do you bring the human experience back to work? How do you prioritize that human experience when all we do, you know, is be cut off from one another? So I think every action to prioritize this humane experience, including designing the office as a welcoming destination, is or contributes to employee motivation. And I'm speaking also like from a personal perspective. And maybe there is one on the fluidity and what are some of the gains and challenges in a space of work without ownership. And maybe let Drok comment, but just I'd like to say, at least from my personal experience and what we're seeing here with colleagues, this concept of owning a workstation, it's kind of changed in priority due to COVID. So if before people were like, I need to own my own things and so on, right now people just want to be safe. And as long as you kind of prioritize that and you make it visible to people why the design is as such, it usually helps them make sense of the situation. And people are not so strong in their own individual opinions right now because they need to be supported. They need to know what's best for them in terms of a macro design, because your health is at the sake of others' health as well. So maybe Drok, if you'd like to comment on this no ownership or how you're seeing it from a design perspective.
Of course. So in terms of fluidity of space, it's also worth taking into account that productivity also comes in regarding to how you collaborate and how you talk to people. So while having seated workstations beforehand, maybe according to technical teams or so on, maybe with this opportunity to have this fluidity, it's much easier for people to connect, to actually work with each other in terms of either mentoring. So maybe you could have an intern sit next to a team leader a few days, while in other days he simply sits next to some of his colleagues, depending on what he needs to learn. On another perspective would be also on collaboration. Maybe it could be cross departments, as opposed to simply sitting with your colleagues, which are in the same department and do the same tasks. You could maybe sit yourself next to someone from another department with which you actually need to work. And then you take out the idea of putting in meetings and focusing more on your work individually. But I think maybe also, Andrei, you could have some ideas on this.
Just a little to touch on the idea of, together with the motivation, of course, having the chance to empower people in organizing their environment that they work in is something that definitely can increase the productivity at work. And in the end, it's just on how you as a company or as an organization define this type of productivity. And also regarding ownership, you can define ownership as an ownership of a desk, ownership of a team, or of a space that you do, or even a project. And if we're talking about ownership of a project, then definitely just setting up the environment you work on it is something that is definitely more beneficial. And I think it's time to actually evolve, of course, depending also on the needs of the teams that use that particular space.
Thanks, Andrei. So unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot to discuss, right? We can go on and on. We'd really like to take the time to transition to our panel now. And I really think that you will find some of the answers to your questions also inferred in the discussion. In the panel, we'll explore, we'll try to look at it from both the what happened in the last 7 months perspective, but also what might happen in the future perspective. So joining Andrei and Ilinka, who you already met for this panel, are Adrian Fogaș, Director Accounts Receivable for Office Depot, Horatiu Gocheș, Director People Advisory Services for EY, and Alexandru Stoianescu, VP of Global Operations at Genpact. So I'd like our panelists to wave at you. You're not we're not seeing you, but you're seeing us. So maybe wave back just for the sake of it. Having 92 people wave back in their offices or our homes would be a great way to get us energized. So we really are grateful for your participation. Like, you all represent leading organizations in your industries, but like first and foremost, like, you're all people. So people with needs and desires and fears and ambitions. So for all of us to get to know you a bit better, could you please tell us in a few words who you are and what's your biggest personal learning from this crisis when it comes to your own work and your own employee experience? So just to keep this flowing, I will nominate you depending on how you come up on my screen. So Horatiu, maybe you can start.
Yeah, Kingo, sure. And thank you for this, and hello everyone, also from my side. Actually, quite a fascinating story I've been listening to, and I'll be happy to explore it further. Until then, yes, indeed, I'm part of the consulting division of UI. I lead the HR team, which has to do with anything that has to do with people. In other words, we're writing on an organization, its processes, its structures, its flows, its governance, even from a perspective of people and human capital. If I am to ask your question in regard to what was my biggest learning, actually I cannot say that I had such a big learning as compared to the epiphany of being tracked into something that I couldn't expect myself to be, meaning I thought of myself as being somehow mature, a seasoned professional that is not going for the first thing, namely to work as I used to do 20 years ago. Somehow I did it, and I did it for months. Working tirelessly, and obviously after that I tried to somehow understand why that has happened, and I've got that very sweet feeling of belonging to something, to a culture, and belonging to a common fight that we are all having all together. And that was quite a good epiphany. And from an HR perspective, this is always the question, how you can make people do this extra mile, okay, in a healthy manner, if you can, not as unhealthy as it used to be for all of us. But that's the key question. And now I felt it for myself.
Thanks, Horatiu, for sharing the epiphany with us. Adi, can you go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Adi Fogash, Adrian Fogash, Adi Fogash. For me, the last 7 months were, my world turned upside down, literally. For me now, the word proud has been seriously reevaluated, proud of the colleagues that I have and of the stories that we've been through. And basically what the biggest learning curve for me was that currently the path that we are on must not be paved only with good intentions, but with meaningful change. So the good intention was, I think we've seen through all of us in the organization, for our customers, basically in each and every country that our companies work for. But the heroic activities that we've done while in the moment of crisis, we should put them in the past and now actually look at how to perform the meaningful change. We've seen in the community, not only in Office Depot, the organization that I work for, but across the community, we've seen some heroic activities, people just taking on the challenge and saying, no, I won't sleep till I won't do this, because I understand what's my purpose. I understand maybe I'm serving some customers with personal protective equipment or whatever the story was. But at one point, you realize that maybe you're working too much, that at one point certain balance need to be drawn, and now we need to plan for the future. Even if we are still living in really volatile environments, basically this is it. How do we do a meaningful change in the future?
Thanks, Adi. Thank you. Heroes need to wake up and think further, right? So, Alexandru, can you maybe share your biggest learning and a bit about yourself?
Yeah, Absolutely. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me first and foremost. Alex Stoinescu. I've been with Genpact for the last 14 years. My role is of ensuring service delivery for one of the verticals that we run globally in Europe. And that means that I work with a lot of people across locations in Europe. I think my biggest learning, well, if I look back at the last 6-7 months, a couple of keywords come to mind. One is grit, for sure. The other one is empathy, and the third one is care. And I say that because I think the lives changed at multiple levels, right? It's not that we had to, bring 6,500 people in a remote environment, and the teams did it in 2.5 weeks. It's because the business changed, and we deal with about 100 customers in Europe, and many of them have been differently affected by the pandemic. Yeah, you'd have your life sciences customers that suddenly need to bring products to the pharmacies, and then everything that you have in the contract is not valid anymore. You just need to make it work faster. And then you have customers for which business is really slow, and we had to adjust to all of that. So if I think of all of the changes that we collectively gone through, I'm simply amazed about on the ability to actually do those changes in a relatively short amount of time and be very effective with it. So I'm immensely proud for that. Personally, I think the biggest learning was to juggle with time, and you guys have mentioned it. I think it's one of our biggest improvement opportunity, and because at some point in time, it's shaded in gray, where work stops and where personal life begins. And it's still a learning exercise, and we still need to figure it out. But I think that rigor and a rhythm in everyday life is my biggest learning.
Thanks, Alex. And indeed, time management has taken on a completely new life of its own right now. I'd also like to invite Ilinka and then Andrei to kind of share their 2 cents with us. You've heard me and Drop talking, so we'll share more about ourselves in November. We'll take the time to take you through our lives. But Ilinka, Andrei, your learnings.
I'll give a pretty short answer. I think you've heard my voice enough in the last hour. So one big learning for me was that the time before and after a meeting is so important when you want to create this shared purpose for a project. So even though the teams that I work with are distributed all over Europe, if the project really required a lot of innovation, whatever container word you want to attach to it, but if it really required a lot of thinking, I would fly in. Right, and we would spend a few days dedicated to completing that project, and now it's broken up into these little artificial components of it, and you don't have that moment before and after, and you're so pressed for time that you enter a meeting and you just get straight to the point. And for the cohesion of the team and for how you view that shared purpose together, it does have a negative impact. So I miss just bumping into somebody before or dragging them to a coffee afterwards. And I really miss it also on a personal level. Again, in my kitchen for 7 months. That's way too long. Love my kitchen, not that much though.
I think it got lovelier by the month. Andrei? You're on mute. Quote of 2020.
Actually, my learning is a question, and this question is, what is holding us back? I mean, we managed so quickly to change and to change so effectively, and we find ourselves always during crisis that we manage some of the difficult steps to take. And then the question is, why do we need to wait for a crisis to actually have this type of evolution? And this is something that myself and my team are actually pondering about and actually working on getting to a conclusion, so that indeed we can also help organizations take this frog leap.
Thanks, Andrei. Wow, that's a big way to end it. If you ever find the answer to that, we'd be more than happy to get it from you. And I think, as you were saying, like, you're thinking about these bigger questions, and I think organizations are as well. And again, for all the participants, please feel free to put your learnings in the chat, or your questions to our panelists, or your wonders or challenges to us. But now I'd like to ask our speakers to share a bit about how their own organizations are working through this challenge, and how has their the employee experience changed in your organization. So maybe we can start with Adi, because you were saying that we were heroes and you were heroes and you're extremely proud of your company. So tell us about the Odyssey.
Thanks a lot. Yes, really proud. We have towards 1 million customers across Europe, so the geographies that we serve, and we've experienced a lot of panic buying. So the panic buying concept, because we deliver also goods that were either labeled as PPE, either really of necessity during COVID times. And we've seen increases of even 8 and 9 times more orders per day than in usual categories. Obviously, we've never had the team sized to deal with 8 or 9 times more delivery basically. So we had to be really creative. Yeah, there were heroic days, because in the end, this is what we kept on saying. It's what's the purpose? We've seen the potential of our colleagues, because we managed to do our processes even after multiples of 8, and our customers received their goods. So that truly showed our potential through heroic actions. It also reiterated the purpose. So what's the purpose? Pushing some buttons, doing a process, making a bit of improvement. It was really accelerated, but the purpose in the end was higher than that. The purpose was that our customers received personal protective equipment that they could go and I don't know, visit if they could, depending on the geographies, their relatives, etc. What's the perspective going forwards? We are still in a really volatile environment. As mentioned, we are dealing in several geographies across Europe that have different legislation, different perceptions, and we have to deal with all of those at the same time. What we realized is that this is not the moment not to invest further. Resilience, it's really a key word. And it's not only a message for Office Depot, but also for all of the companies and the representatives of companies that are joining this call. This is not the time to drill down on resilience. We actually need to double our work going forward, because constant change will be the rule from now on. So this was the first key message that I wanted to send across to the audience. Please do not lower your efforts and build across the resilience bit. The second message was also in regards to the linkages in between the outcomes. So the questions that we have been asking ourselves and our teams and our colleagues so far might not have probably been the best. Looking at the true purpose of our work more thoroughly might be a key going forward. Outcome-based leadership, outcome-based management, outcome-based discussions, and everything that derives from this. And the third bit that I wanted to mention, yeah, again, really proud. You can see that I'm a bit poetic. Really proud of my colleagues and the environment. But yeah, what I mentioned just at the beginning of my presentation, that our future path must not be paved only with good intentions, but also with meaningful change. This meaningful change might mean something slightly different from company to company, but in the end is how do we get closer to ourselves. I also really miss getting out for a coffee with someone. As you can see, I'm in the office. But out of 450 people in Cluj, we are roughly like 40, so like 10% every day. We had 80 most of in our better days, and quite changing. But yeah, we don't necessarily foresee in the immediate future that will be more. So the virtual coffees, the virtual inspiration meetings and gatherings still need to happen for at least for the foreseeable immediate future. So in the end, and I hope that we do not do the 2 or 3 hours extra per day, as shown at the beginning of this call. Time management is really important. Jumping from one call to the other is not the key, and we actually need to step down a bit, because now is the time. We've been through a lot of heroic changes. We've been through a lot of actions that we had to take on the spot. but now is the time to just relax a bit, analyze what has happened until now and how we build on into the future. So these were the messages that I wanted to send across. And if there are any questions, probably towards the end of the meeting, by all means, gladly answer. Thank you.
I think you touched on a few like really key points. I think celebrating success of the people and kind of all their activities. I think you just gave us and all the participants a very genuine way of doing this. And I think also like what you were emphasizing is geared to purpose. And in your case, especially as you were kind of helping people in the front lines, it was pretty easy to link people to purpose. I'd like to ask Alexandru now to share what's been going on in Genpact with regards to the employee experience, and maybe I'd also like to ask if you would like to maybe touch on a question that we have. Anything about career planning, succession planning, and business continuity? I think you already mentioned business continuity, but how has stuff changed in Genpact with regards to the employee experience?
Yeah, you've given me a very broad spectrum, so let me give it a shot. Look, I think that in the first months of COVID, everybody was very concentrated on actually making it work remotely, right? And there was a lot of debate. I remember last year's about is work from home working? Is it not working? What are the downsides? What are the plus sides? How is it culturally accepted in various regions of the world and so on? Well, guess what? It's working, right? We've been working from home for a longer time. But I think at Genpact, we're also conscious of the fact that, just giving people a laptop and ensuring that the connectivity works is not enough, right? So there's a bunch of principles that we're guiding ourselves now after. And I'll start with the first one. I think the first one is employee safety. Our people need to be safe. Whatever we create, however we create the environment, it needs to be safe. So that's paramount, and it will be beyond everything else. At the same time, we are acknowledging also that some of the elements of our day-to-day interaction, of the way we're running the business, are simply not the same completely in a remote environment. And that's where I think you guys make a number of good points, because we've seen learning curves actually being a little bit flatter during a remote environment. We've seen some of the innovation quotient, however you measure it, and collaboration quotients actually go down. And we also believe that the entire experience of the company or of the work is enhanced by some sort of physical presence or physical interaction. Therefore, I believe the future is mixed, and it's something new for some of us, something not so new for others, because I would imagine Horatio has a lot of colleagues that don't come to the office, that are used with working remotely, for instance, in advisory services or in consulting and so on. Equally, in Genpact, we have a gang that is used to working always from home and have been working from home. So what we need is actually a model to mix both of the worlds, and a model where all of this comes together in a more seamless fashion. We call that work from anywhere, not necessarily work from home, because we believe that the future will hold spaces for collaboration. Yes, many, maybe more than we have today, but potentially smaller in size, and with an entire agenda of high touch point interactions planned out for presence on the floor. And they can be a range of meetings for collaboration. There can be a range of meetings for innovation. There can be all sorts of meetings. There needs to be a space for that collaboration. But we also think that the future holds the need for flexibility. That if I want to pick up my laptop and move from Bucharest to Sibiu, I can do that. Or if I want to work from Timișoara, I can equally do that. So it's a little bit of a mix and match. And it has a couple of key components to it. One is, how do you design those elements, and what are the touch points in the life cycle of the employee where you have to maximize space in the office or presence in the office? Then what is the whole stack of digital tools and technologies that help you engage with the workforce that is equally in the office and remote? Imagine you have a town hall for 300 people and 150 of them are spread across the country. how do you do that? You need to have, a clear digital tools flow and so on. So all of those things need to come into play and probably need to be part of the, office of the future. If I can give some food for thought to Andre and the gang. And I think last but not least, it's all about the employee experience. If I'm somebody that is working remotely and I'm not necessarily in Cluj, where we have an office, and I am in Târgu Mureș, for instance, how do I ensure that the experience for that employee, or the Genpact look and feel, or the EY look and feel, and the Steelcase look and feel is the same or close to the same through the entire induction process, onboarding process, execution? All of this stuff sort of came out as a need and as a prerequisite as we've operated over these 6-7 months. And I don't think we have the answers to all of those questions, but it's part of a larger umbrella of making this work and making this model in its mixed ways and fashions work.
Thanks, Alexandra. I'm really happy that I've given you a very broad spectrum to answer to, because I think you took us places. And as you said, it's not a recipe that you're cooking, but you're like constantly thinking, what are the ingredients depending on what you're trying to achieve. Horatiu, how does UI look like now from an employee experience?
Actually, Alex, you made me jealous of your lengthy and very powerful answer. Therefore, my plan for the next minutes is to answer two questions. Actually, the initial question that Kingo raised in regard to employee experience, and the second one, I will touch a little bit on Alex's work from anywhere concept, if I may. Kingo, in regard to your first question, I wouldn't answer as an EY employee, for the simple purpose that myself, as being a consultant, I've been in touch in the last 6 months with hundreds of organizations, literally, because this is my job, and I think it's more beneficial for all of us to share these tens and hundreds of interactions rather than sharing what's happening within UI. Let me start with a little bit of definitions and make sure that we are somehow aligned in regard to that. Whenever we are speaking of employee experience, we inevitably think at the idea of motivation, and I think our audience today is also considering this thing and is constantly raising this question. Leaving the internal motivation aside, what makes myself being motivated, the external motivation always comes from two different angles. One of them is climate and the other one is culture. And this is something that, stays usually with HR guys like myself, but also with leadership. And leaders do understand the difference in between these two. By that, I would like to emphasize the idea that this is the reason for which I said in the very beginning that it's quite an interesting presentation that you gave us. You cannot be motivated without having the right climate. Climate stays with the workplace, climate stays with salaries and bonuses, with everything that is reward driven and so on. For power of example, culture is about growth, culture is about leadership, engaging powerful conversation and so on. There are some other dimensions that fall somewhere in the middle, like an organization. It's both in terms of climate and culture. Point is that you cannot make someone being motivated, make someone be motivated without providing the right climate and culture. And yes, I do fully agree with your presentation that actually you need to fix it right. The second aim for my very specific intervention now is to link, to bridge in between what your initial question was about employee experience. And as a confirmation, once again, all the organizations that I interacted with in the last 6 months are about twisting and balancing and leveraging the move away from culture from climate towards culture, meaning how can I compensate through leadership conversations, if you want, the lack of an office. Okay, put it very very prosaic, but this is the kind of question. I suddenly lost climate, I just have culture. what do I do now? How do I balance them? And bridge this concept with Alex's idea of work from anywhere. I was somehow lucky enough to be involved in a cross-EMEA project that UI was working on in order to understand how can someone know, as an organization, know what are the jobs and what's the right number of employees that should come to the office, and what are the right numbers of employees that should stay at home. It's quite impossible to answer. Basically, once again, I was quite lucky to work with Indians up to guys from England. It was quite a mixed team. The good news is that we raised very nice questions. The bad news is that we didn't find an answer. And after that, the team was dissolved. But we came up with an excellent idea in our view. Is that it comes down very, very much to having a vision-led approach. A vision-led approach meaning, what does my mind tell me, as Alex has put it? What does my leadership want me to do, to stay at home or go to the office, when and why and where, and so on. Building a bottom-up model, okay, you can do it in the end. I'm quite joking that we were not able to do it. We did it. But it proved to be more powerful, the idea that you should have in your mind, what actually do you want to achieve in terms of this vision-led approach. You can work from anywhere as well as you can work from the office entirely. Why is the bigger question. Hope I didn't steal too much time. I just wanted to share these both elements that I had on my mind listening to you guys.
Thanks, Horat. You know, definitely worth bringing in also like how, okay, we can talk about purpose and being driven by the why, but like how is leadership changing to be able to empower those employees to think about their own why. I will at one point move to a question in the Q&A section, which is really, really interesting. But before that, I'd like to ask maybe Alex and Adi to, you both talked about this need of bringing people together at one point. Yes, you can work from anywhere, but at one point you need that collaboration. You need to keep that up. Any examples that that come to mind of things that you're doing or you've seen happening in order to maintain this collaboration between people and this trust? Any as pragmatic of practices that come to mind, as Horacio was sharing like insights from a management consultant's perspective into the lives of hundreds of clients. Maybe you can also give a few examples. How do you maintain trust and innovation?
I have 3 examples, if that's okay with me to start. Thanks a lot. The first one is just seeing people helping each other. My example mentioning volumes 8 times higher than you used to. And it was, as Horacio mentioned, the bottom to top approach. So we just launched the idea that yes, we need help. And then we've just seen people starting to help each other. Yeah, I know that process. Yeah, even if I don't know it, I will learn it like ASAP. So again, that was really, really helpful. And the vast majority came from as support from the teams. The second bit is, I know we're, most of us are coffee addicts. I see a lot of teams, actually, even if it's remote, having that daily 5 or 10 minutes morning coffee session. So just that invite that always keeps on popping from Monday to Friday. And that's just the time for them. I don't think they are speaking work stuff. It's just the usual catch up that you would have had in normal circumstances. It's the best that we can have, but still it's at least an environment which at the beginning of the day, people can share their thoughts, can see their faces, can hear the body language, etc. And the third one, I think, is just an example that I wanted to share because a lot of organizations are comprised into it, even in this call. It's aspects such as walking month. Okay, even if you're not actually in the office, by joining a program with another 500 people and competing against them, in terms of how many steps would you do a day, regardless where those steps would be, in grandma's orchard or in front of the building, or some that come into the office, doesn't matter. It's still in the end us working together in the office and outside of it. So these are the 3 examples. I have more and more, but I understand that I also have a limited amount of time. But these were the 3 examples that I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Alex, any thoughts?
Yeah, for me there are, so I recognize some of them, Adi. I think we're using some of them effectively as well. Look, there are some ground rules that we developed over time. I think never assume that, some people don't feel this differently. I think I've seen people that I used to work for the last, 12, 14 years that would really, into the work and really could take everything that was thrown at them and so on. And this period of time has proven to be a little bit too much at times. So people need to juggle with kids, people need to juggle with pets, people need to juggle with other kinds of schedules that stack upon each other. So I think my first ground rule is just be kind and attentive with people's calendars. Stop your impulse of flooding the calendar, because that's that's a habit and has been a habit since the pandemic. I think the second one is, for me at least, allow enough time to unwind. We've had a lot of attention on how many people have actually taken their holidays. If they're not taking their holidays, how do we arrange to do that, and so on. And that was because it's a key element of everyone's well-being to be able to disconnect, right? And then I think a third one is, we're probably a little bit more open to working schedules as a whole. I mean, there's clear priorities throughout the day for people that need to bring kids to school, right? And there are questions. I'd like to take these 3 hours in the middle of the day, recoup after that, and so on. So I think we've adjusted our working schedules at times to allow for that. It's not always possible, but we're very open to that, or a lot more open to that as an organization, I would say, just to allow people to sort of build their own schedule, because one size does not fit all. And we do need to encompass everyone. So I think those will be my three guiding principles, I would say.
Thanks, Alex, and really thanks for the pragmatic advice. I think if one of the outcomes of this webinar is just a few less meetings in the next days, I think everybody's going to be far more better off. We only have 3 minutes left. We're trying to also answer a few of our questions in writing as we go, because we'd really like to include everyone's thoughts. For the next minute or so, I'd really like to challenge our panelists to think into the future. This time last year, I mean, nobody thought, maybe Bill Gates, but nobody listened to him, that, a global pandemic would hit us, or we'd be like in such a huge disruption. But now that we know, and we're kind of more prepared or paranoid than we were before, depending, I'd like maybe to ask Horacio and Adi as last concluding thoughts. How do you think, what do you think organizations should be looking at in order to be future-proof? What would be your prediction, and what should we keep on the radar as organizations? Horacio, would you like to go first?
Yes, I can try to do it. Although honestly, I don't know the answer. What I know for sure is though that we are in an obvious lack of any kind of decision-making rationale, meaning we don't have any kind of control keys. Nonetheless, this still requires, in my view, the need to act and the need for decisiveness. And in my view, once again, it's better to do something instead of not doing anything. And this is somehow linked to what I've heard also across the country, meaning the organizations have went towards a more active and action-oriented position, rather than waiting for the best in class, because everyone has used to work in the last 100 years just by benchmarking the best in class. No, I think it's not about that anymore. No, I think it matters most what suits you, rather than what's on the market, what the others are doing. So just be courageous and have the decision-making process vision-led, once again, led by.
Thanks, Horacio. Thank you. Adi, any last thoughts?
So I totally agree with Horacio. Some sort of decision is better than no decision, especially in these times, with the subsequent risks that it might bring. And just wanted to reiterate how important resilience should be for all of us from now on, and investing in it. And basically do not go into some sort of a comfort zone in which we, first of all, do not take any decision, and second of all, do not engage into bottom to top discussions as well, and just keep on asking questions to ourselves. So whatever used to work in February, I'm not even going 10 years ago, whatever used to work in February doesn't work now. So we just, all of us need to be prepared for constant change. Thank you.
Thank you, Adi. Well, Alex, I think you've already told organizations to, keep their eyes on what's important and be resilient. We'd really like to continue the discussion. We've reached the end of our webinar, so we don't want to keep our participants from their next online meeting, although we would, or we should have to do that. But I'd just like to really thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your thoughts. We've seen immense diversity in the panel, and it's not about what is more important. Is motivation more important? Is a process more important? Is purpose more important? They're all important. And what you're seeing on screen is a way to make sense of things, and maybe to get back to what Horacio was saying, a way that this guides our decision making in our company. All of these elements, process, so what a company does, culture, what their people share, what their values are, what their common behaviors are, what tools they use, what choice and control they have over their space, whether it's office, home, or anywhere, as Alexandra was saying, they're all important. And we believe that extreme strategies don't work. And in order for organizations to find their own way, they need to look at this holistically. So again, thank you very much. I leave you with another quote, and I just like to stress again Adi's words about nothing is certain and we don't know what to do, but there's one thing that we need to keep doing is to keep asking ourselves the question, because one thing that we cannot do is freeze. People and organizations cannot freeze right now. So we'd really like to invite you to continue this conversation, reach out to us, reach out to ABSL, and welcome you back in November for a live walkthrough. We hope you enjoyed this panel. I'd just like everybody joining to unmute and say goodbye, just so we can do a choir of voices. And we hope that you have a great day and a great business mixer here. Thanks ABSL for the occasion.
You are very much welcome, but unfortunately, it's not possible for participants to unmute.
No, just us. No, it's just our choir to the participants. So 3, 2, 1, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Guys. All the best.
Bye.
Thank you.